Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be looking at our second to last presidential election prediction for the 2020 cycle. So this is going to be our second to last. We're going to do one more right like a day or two before the election, but this is going to be the last one up until then. So I filled out all of the safe states for Biden and Trump. These are states that either candidate is going to win by 12 points or more. If you ever see a prediction channel with states like Missouri or Arkansas or Mississippi is likely, that's ridiculous. Or South Carolina, again, ridiculous. Look at the latest polls. These states are safe for Trump, and likewise, these states are safe for Biden. We're actually going to add a state that is going to be safe for Biden. We're going to add the state of New Mexico. I don't really see that state being remotely competitive this time around. There were some polls early on against other candidates like Buttigieg and Warren and stuff that were kind of somewhat close for a state like New Mexico, but as of recently, it's not even close. Biden is doing very, very well here. So we're going to move west to east here, starting with the state of Nevada. So if we look at the polling out of the state of Nevada, polls have actually tightened up quite a bit between Biden and Trump, and a lot of election agencies are calling the state as leans Democrat, which on my scale would be anywhere from 2 to 6 points. And I think that's actually very likely. So we're going to put the state of Nevada as lean Democrat. I actually agree with that characterization. I think likely is much too high. The last time we saw Nevada by a likely margin was in 2012. And yeah, if we go back, and all of the counties in Nevada trended red in 2016. Based on national polling and the fact Trump's favorability not too good, that'll probably reverse some of those at least trends for the short term. Next, we're going to look at the state of Arizona. So if we go back here, the polls out of the state of Arizona are kind of all over the place right now. We have some lean Democrat, some tilt Democrat. But one thing that stands out to me, and ignore this Trafalgar poll, Trafalgar is only really very accurate in the Rust Belt. But something that stands out to me here is that in 2016, Trump was ahead in Arizona in nearly every poll. This time, it's the exact opposite. Biden is ahead in most of the polls, 75% or more. And though it seems, it seemed to be getting closer, but then it split again. Biden's going back up, Trump's going back up. Personally, my last prediction, I had Arizona, I think, as tilt Republican, possibly. We're going to actually put it to tilt Democrat now. I think with candidates like Martha McSally and Donald Trump in Arizona, that kind of seals the deal for the state. And quite frankly, it seems like a state like Virginia that once it goes blue, it's not going to go back for a very long time. So it looks like Arizona is going to narrowly swing to Joe Biden. Again, he's up 4-5 in Arizona, but it's the polls are going to tighten up, and the election results are going to be much tighter than this. And if somehow Trump does win Arizona on election night, that's good news for him. His campaign is alive. But I think if Trump loses the state of Arizona, you could probably call the election because there's states to the left of Arizona, like in the Rust Belt, that would probably go to Biden in that case. So Trump needs Arizona. Biden really doesn't. Electorally, he doesn't need it, but it's one of those states that is to the right of other swing states. And if this state goes, that's bad news for Donald Trump. The state of Colorado is likely. We're not really even going to talk about it. There's no point. This state really isn't that competitive, but if we want to be specific with the margin, it's probably going to be under 12 points, maybe around 10 or so. So for that alone, we're going to put it as likely. The state of Texas, and this is a really big state that only recently in this cycle has actually been deemed competitive. And that's for the first time since probably the 1990s that it was seen as somewhat competitive. If we look at the polls here, polls are pretty close. Trump is up in the aggregates by around 2 to 3 points, but Biden is definitely within the margin of error in nearly every poll. He's definitely in striking distance. You only have to go back to August where Biden was up more than Trump consistently. Now Trump seems to be up more consistently. I think that's more of the result we're probably going to see out of a state like Texas, which has been a safe Republican state for a very long time, decades, only since now going into the purple column. Texas is technically not a swing state as it has not swung to the Democrats yet. In fact, it hasn't elected a Democrat statewide since 1994. So for that reason, and for the reason that Trump is up in the polls narrowly, I think it's safe to put Texas as lean Donald Trump. I think the final result will probably be 3 to 4 points. Anything higher than that would probably be good news for Republicans, considering the unfavorability of a candidate like Trump in former GOP strongholds like Georgia, Texas, Arizona. These states still are, quote-unquote Republican states, but these were states that you could always rely on to go Republican, and now you can't due to things like changing demographics, urbanization, and the bluing of the suburbs as well. These are all very suburban states here in the Sun Belt. We'll move up to Nebraska's 2nd district. Let's see if we can actually find a poll in Nebraska's 2nd. We probably can. The 2nd district is actually kind of all over the place here. We have polls that go to lean R to lean Democrat. Personally, these polls have a pretty wide margin. And I'm tempted to say that this will go to Trump simply because in 2018 it went to Don Bacon. But again, that would be a bit of a naive prediction, I guess, in terms of the Trump campaign. It really does look like this is going to be a lean Biden district since he's up around 10. Oh, we did not want to do that. So we're going to put Nebraska's 2nd as lean Joe Biden. This is the first time Nebraska's 2nd has gone blue since 2008. Minnesota was a state earlier on in the race that was somewhat competitive. If we go to it now, we got lean Democrat, we got likely Democrat, and Joe Biden is up very, very consistently in the polls. He's up 10 points, 9 points. It's starting to narrow up a bit, but if in all honesty, it looks like this cycle with the numbers that Trump and Biden have, this is going to be a likely blue state. Biden will probably win it by 7 or 8, possibly. And my final election prediction, I'll do my exact margins for how the states will go, at least from my perspective. But we're not going to do that in this video right now. This will just kind of be a more quicker general election prediction. The state of Iowa is really interesting because this was a state that Trump won by 10 points, basically 10 points back in 2016, 9 and some change. But this time is actually being seen as fairly competitive. And in fact, Biden is up in all of the aggregates in this state. Although the polls that have Trump up have him up by a larger lead, Biden is in striking distance now, which was not the case earlier in the year. It only really became the case, post-COVID era here. But again, these are really, really small numbers out of the state of Iowa, and polling in Iowa tends to kind of be all over the place. Gut instinct, I'm going to put Iowa as lean Republican. Trump was only up 2 or 3 points in the polling aggregate when he won Iowa by 9. Even with Biden up a tiny bit, and even accounting for the secret Trump vote, it would still factor in that Trump is probably going to win this state by around 2 to 3 points. So again, as you could tell if you've been paying attention so far, this is bad news for the Trump campaign. He's losing ground in every single state we've covered so far. Minnesota, this was a state that back in 2016, he only lost by 1.5 percentage points. And we're projecting it here, and all the polls are that this is going to be a likely state. Now, I know polls are not indicative of how the actual results are going to be, but again, the polls in 2016 weren't that far off, especially the national polls. And if the national polls are to be believed that Trump's only going to get 43 or 42% of the popular vote, he's in a whole lot of trouble. I could tell you something right now that I'm very confident in. Trump is not going to win the popular vote no matter what this election cycle. He didn't win it in 2016, and he seems to be in a weaker position even with the incumbency due to things like COVID, the economy, and his overall unfavorability ratings do not help him against a candidate like Biden, who is arguably a much more likable candidate than Trump to your average voter. We're going to move over to Wisconsin now. If we look back at the polls here for Wisconsin, some people have Wisconsin as a toss-up. Biden is up around 7 to 6 points in the polling aggregate. Again, a word of caution. This is something we saw back in 2016. Hillary was up by 6 in Wisconsin. She lost it by 0.7. That does not mean, however, that is the case this time. I think overall, the momentum of the Trump campaign in 2016 is not there anymore. Trump certainly has a solid base of supporters, and in fact, I'll probably make a video on Trump's election strategy coming up. But if you can't really feel it, this is a very different cycle than in 2016. In 2016, we had 8 years of Democratic administration, a very polarizing administration. We weren't in a pandemic or a Great Recession / Great Depression, so this really does change the dynamics. And also, I don't think it's ever happened in American history where the party in power has stayed in power after such a recession, regardless of the cause, regardless of the handling usually. It almost doesn't happen. I think Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan are going to be close. I really do. I think Wisconsin's going to be closer than the other two, and I think it's going to go tilt Biden, if you want to ask me. That's my prediction right now. I think Wisconsin is going to be close. Again, tilt margin is anything under 2 points. I think it's going to get down to the wire there. I could be wrong. It could be much more of a lopsided margin. Lean, likely is a stretch, I don't really buy all of the hype that this is going to be like a massive Biden landslide by any means. But if we look at our electoral numbers right now, Joe Biden at 235, Trump at 169. He really needs to win the rest of the states on this map to get to the desired 270. And if we take away Virginia, which he's not going to win Virginia, this puts Biden's floor at 248. And we'll go through some of the scenarios a little bit at the end here of how the actual result could really turn down in the end. So anyway, we're going to move on to Michigan. If we look at the polling out of the state of Michigan, oh my God, yeah, that is ridiculous. Michigan is not safe Democrat. That is the dumbest thing I've seen anybody ever predict. Lean Democrat, likely Democrat seems more appropriate. If we look at the polling aggregate here, Biden is up by 7, Biden's up by 8. We could see a result very similar to that. Again, if we go back to 2016, well, yeah, Trump only won this state by 0.3%. It was one of the closest margins in the country behind New Hampshire. And of course, if we look at the trends, the entire state trended more Republican. Going back down to 2008, it wasn't that long ago that Michigan was safe blue in 2008. Barack Obama won this state by 17 percentage points. So, looking at the polls right now, this was a state that already polling-wise was not looking good for Trump. I think Michigan is probably going to be lean. I don't actually think it's going to be likely. My earlier predictions might have had it as likely, but I don't think the margin is going to be over 6 points, which is what I consider a likely margin. I think it'll be around 4 or 5 points. Because again, some races in the midterm, like Attorney General here in Michigan, were only around 4 points difference. It wasn't crazy, and that was a +9 Democratic environment. But again, this is a presidential; it could be different. But that's what Michigan is going to go. Michigan is going to be a lean Democrat as of right now. Ohio is an interesting state too, because this was a state Trump won by a lot, and now Trump is actually gaining back in Ohio. As per the latest polling aggregates, Trump is up by 1, Trump is up by 0.2. Again, just like Iowa, this is going to be lean Republican probably. Even some Biden staffers I've heard online were questioning why they were even spending that much money in the state, because really it's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot you can really do with Ohio. Biden doesn't need Ohio by any stretch. We haven't even filled all the states, and Biden's at 251. He only needs 19 more electoral votes to win. The Biden campaign realistically should not be spending a lot of time in Ohio or Iowa. And, many people look at Ohio because it's voted with the winner of the presidential election. I think since 1960. I could be wrong about that. But for a very long time. So many people look to that as the reason why the Biden campaign is making an important play here. But also, Missouri was one of those bellwether states too, and Missouri is safe red this time. Missouri's been safe red since 2016, likely red since 2012. So, realistically, these trends are going to change, and they will continue to change. The political map here does not look like the political map of 2008. Obama won by a landslide, but states where he did not do well in were states like Texas. Texas he lost by 12 points. Arizona lost that by 8 points. Now we're looking at a scenario where these states are a lot closer, but likewise, we go back to 2008, states like Missouri, states like Montana, states like even West Virginia are not even going to be close. So the political map is always evolving. We'll move to Maine and we'll go down. Maine's at large is going to be likely Biden. There was a very few select amount of polls that had this state relatively close in the beginning. If we go back, we can just look at the Maine at large polls. This was a state Trump only lost by around 3 points back in 2016, but nearly all the polls are showing a super lopsided victory for Biden. This is definitely going to go to Biden. The 2016 was definitely a one-off. The polls back in 2016, no, most people didn't think Maine was going to be that close, but the polls were much, much closer. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 points maybe. These are 15, 16, 17. So Maine at large is probably going to go likely. Maine's 2nd district is actually kind of contentious, but if I had to go on a hunch, I would say Trump narrowly wins Maine's 2nd district just because he won it by such a lopsided margin last time, and polls actually have been making this race closer. New Hampshire is a state you think would be close, but if we look at polling, again, this is really bad news for Trump. New Hampshire's polling is very lopsided. 9 points, 10 points, etc. I think, honestly, I would not be surprised if Biden won the state by 7. So we're actually going to put New Hampshire as a likely Democrat. That's the first time I've done that on this channel here, but again, based on the polling averages, this is not a state that's expected to be close. Moving on down to Pennsylvania. If we give Pennsylvania to Biden, he is at 277. If we give Pennsylvania to Trump, he will survive at least until the next state. If we look at the polling out of Pennsylvania, this state is shaping up to, it was the closest lean blue state early on in terms of the polling. But if we look at recently, Biden has been falling off in the polling averages here. In fact, the latest polls, his lead has been shrinking. We could see a scenario where a state like Pennsylvania actually decides the presidential election, quite honestly. But as of right now, Biden is up by a likely margin. And though I expect Pennsylvania to be close, at the end of the day, again, looking at the polling, and if we look back at 2016, what Trump was able to accomplish was remarkable in the state. He basically solidified rural Pennsylvania as Trump country. All of these counties, especially northeastern Pennsylvania, these areas which had voted for Obama twice and then went to Trump, if we go back to 2008, Pennsylvania was a whole lot bluer than it is now. So Pennsylvania has moved significantly to the right. Even if it votes to the left in this presidential election, the overall trend of Pennsylvania as of right now is heading more to the right. It's a mostly white state. It's a mostly working class blue-collar state. And Republicans seem to keep doing better with those voters. 2020, I think, will be an anomaly because Republicans are running, quite frankly, a really shitty strategy, and I'll make a video on that. But effectively, either way, Pennsylvania is going to be close. But as of right now, based on the knowledge that we have, if the polls get closer, I'll probably change this. But I'm going to call the state of Pennsylvania for Biden by a tilt margin. I think Pennsylvania is going to be very, very close. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona, I think, are going to be the states that decide the election. Possibly Florida, too, when we get down to it. Virginia, we're literally not even going to talk about. We'll put that as likely. I don't really think it's going to be safe yet this cycle, but after 2020, if Trump somehow wins 2020, Virginia will be a safe blue state, more along the lines of a state like Delaware or even Maryland. It's going to be probably very, very blue. But for now, probably likely Republican. North Carolina is a state, by the way, Biden has won the presidency now, 290 to 188, but will continue with the rest of our projection anyway. North Carolina has been a state the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign have been paying a lot of attention to. If we go back to 2016, this was a state that Donald Trump won by 3.6 percentage points. And if we look at the trends, the same trends persist here. Most of these rural areas went heavily to Trump. It was this urban, I think they call this like the urban triangle here. This area here went more to Hillary Clinton, but the rest of the state going much more toward Biden. Trump. It's getting late. If we look at the polls out of North Carolina, Biden has been consistently up again. But a word of caution for the Biden supporters. A lot of these polls that Biden is up are Democratic polls. But then again, Democrats are oversampled in North Carolina polls. They always have. In my last prediction video, I'll pull up the opinion polls from 2016 so we can really look at a side-by-side comparison. But on election day, this was the state that Hillary Clinton was up by 2.5 percentage points, I believe. And for most of election night, she was actually leading just because those precincts that came in first were more in favor of her. But again, Trump is still within the margin of error in a lot of these polls and in the aggregate too. Based on what I've seen, now this might be a gut feeling, but I think the state of North Carolina will go to Trump. Probably around 2 points, maybe 2.1, but I don't really see North Carolina flipping in this cycle. Again, this was a state that back in 2012 went back to Romney. This state is probably one of the reddest of these swing states, minus Texas and Georgia, which we're going to get to. It's probably the third reddest on here. And I guess some good news for the Trump campaign, we're going to project tonight that he's going to keep the state of North Carolina, but then again, he doesn't win the presidency, so it doesn't mean all that much. But again, he only needs to flip a couple states, as we're going to get to. Georgia, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on. The polls in Georgia have gotten a lot more narrow. One of those states, like Texas, that's going to make a lot of noise this cycle and ultimately be a lot less eventful. I think the state of Georgia is going to go to Trump by a tilt margin. And the reason I say that is because Georgia, like Texas, is growing at an exponentially quickly rate. The suburbs are getting rapidly bluer. But I think it's going to be on the cusp of 2 points, which is why I'm just going to put it as tilt. So I'm actually putting Georgia to the left of North Carolina in this prediction, which might be shocking, but the trends of the state are so much so that it's very, very possible. Again, midterms are not indicative of general elections, but Stacey Abrams only lost that governor's race by 1.4 percentage points. And only since then, more registered Democrats more voters have been registered in the state, and a good portion of those voters are going to be voting for Joe Biden, voters that wouldn't have voted or didn't vote for Hillary Clinton the last time around. And that brings us to our final state on this prediction, the state of Florida. If we go back to the 2016 election, Florida was also a very, very, very close state. This was a state that Trump only won by 1.2%. Around the margin that it went to Obama in 2012, actually a little bit more so. We're not going to focus too much on the trends because it's sort of irrelevant, but rural areas trended more Republican, urban areas trended more Democrat. That's going to continue. If we look at the polling out of the state of Florida, which is kind of interesting, Biden has been up fairly consistently, but we're seeing some life from the Trump campaign from a few select polls. But again, Biden being only up 2 points is not good news for him. This was a state he was up in 5 points back in May and April during the height of the pandemic when a lot of old voters were fleeing the Trump campaign, or at least telling pollsters they were doing that. This was a state that voted way to the right of the nation in 2018, actually unseating a Democratic incumbent, Bill Nelson, and electing Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, to the executive mansion. So this is definitely a state that has moved a lot more to the right, and based on internal migration patterns and demographics of Florida, I think it's going to continue in that rightward direction, and I think Trump will probably narrowly win the state of Florida as well, but by a smaller margin. So here we have a 290-248 scenario between incumbent President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden. So this is my October prediction for the 2020 general election. Please, if you like this video or have any thoughts about it, please leave a thumbs up and leave comments in the comment section, please, and share this video and this channel. Please subscribe. I'll be making more prediction videos throughout the rest of the month and more analysis videos as we get closer to election day. It's coming up really quick, so we're only going to have one more general election prediction before the end of this, and maybe another Senate or so. That's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all for watching. Again, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.